I love the idea of spoiling Paradise Lost. It's in the title.
Anyway, this is depressing. Let's talk about
let's talk
murder.
Let's talk about murder and a sociopath. And also, happy birthday, a day late.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How was your birthday?
That's all right. I decided to celebrate it Jewish style, so sunset to sunset. So it's still technically my birthday. But
Yeah,
just
still
barely.
going. Nice. Are you allowed?
It was great.
Are you allowed to
Yeah.
use elevators and machines? Well, apparently you are, because
Yes,
you're
I'm not an Orthodox Dukes.
Orthodox birthday Dukes.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to work most of the day, but then I kind of treated myself to a drive up to Beverly Hills, basically, and there's this great historic state park, and did a trail run, and that was just gorgeous. You know, you can see the entire South LA basin, you can see Hollywood, you can see into the San Fernando Valley, you can see all the mountains, and it was a beautiful, clear day. And then I decided I was going to make sushi, which I had done Saturday, and not very well. And I think it was just like I'd kind of forgotten a lot of my sushi making technique, but for whatever reason, I was in better form. And so I had some leftover sushi grade salmon, and I bought some tuna and some Dungeness crab. And then I finally remembered that, like, oh yeah, that's right. The way you roll rice when you want it on the outside is you have to put a little bit of saran wrap down, over your rolling mat. And I had forgotten about that. So the night before, I'd made a huge mess. And it's just like, why is there so much rice on my rolling mat? and like, I also didn't make enough rice. So then I made some more, but then it like froze. And so then I was having trouble getting it into like the right size ball. But this time I kind of did. I took a couple photos, and I was like, that is a nice looking plate of sushi right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, shall we ripple?
Yeah. Let's ripple. We're talking about the Netflix series Ripley, directed by Steven. Oh God, can you? Zaillian. Yes. And just recently came out. We have recently reposted our Ripley episodes, and now we're talking about episodes 1 through 4 tonight.
Shall I start the recap?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, the first episode is called A Hard Man to Find, and we meet Tom Ripley, a kind of weasel-faced, scurrying wannabe fraudster and petty criminal in New York. Everything's black and white. He is tracked down by a detective, which causes him some consternation because we sense that there might be things that he could get in trouble for. But this detective is on a benevolent mission and introduces him to Herbert Greenleaf. Herbert, as you'll remember from the books, sends Tom to Europe to find his wayward son, Dickie. Yep. And Tom's not sure he wants to go, but he decides to go. And after some arduous journeys by boat, by train, by taxi, by bus, up some steps, down some steps, Tom meets Dickie and Dickie's girlfriend, Marge Sherwood, on the beach, gets invited back to dinner and cocktails, and gets an invitation to, let's do it again sometime, and you should stay at this hotel. And the last shot is Tom watching the amazing rippling Mediterranean Sea in high contrast black and white, while Dickie and Marge motor launch out to Dickie's catch.
Yes.
And that's the last thing we see.
Yeah. Episode 2 is called Seven Mercies, and Tom confesses to Dickie that he's been sent by his dad. There's a great scene where Dickie kind of like is more amused by it than anything like that. And we get to see a good amount of awkward Tom trying to get to know Dickie, and Marge is kind of onto him right away and doesn't really like him very much. We get the Carlo the criminal scene far earlier in this version than we do in the book, and where basically Carlo is asking, he needs a couple of mules to take. We're not sure, but probably drugs on trains to Rome, I think. Yeah. And Tom wants
Paris, right?
Oh, right. Oh, that's right. Across
Maybe
the border.
from Rome.
Yeah, from Rome to Paris. Tom wants to do it. Dickie's onto it pretty quickly, and that Carlo is a gangster and is like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to engage in crime. And we get a letter from Herbert, basically saying, like, I know the second letter that we get in the next few episodes.
Well, the letter arrives in this episode, and then the contents are revealed
in the third
next
episode. Yeah, but we realize that, yes, because a couple of months have gone by at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and there might have been a few other things that happened in that episode, but I think you summed it up. Just a lot of awkwardly Tom trying to ingratiate himself. There is the icebox trip to Rome, which does lead to like an interesting little soliloquy from Tom about freedom and refrigerators. So episode 3 is Il Sommerso. This one I thought was rather masterful.
Yeah, I think it's the best of the 4.
Yeah. So we learn that the letter that both men have gotten letters. Tom has gotten a letter from Herbert Greenleaf basically saying, "You're done. I don't think you're being successful. The tone is rather cold." And Tom sort of spies on Dickie and overhears. You can tell that the letter is somewhat negative that Dickie has gotten, that suggests that maybe Dickie should not trust Tom. Dickie shares this with Marge. Tom overhears it. We get the sense that Marge has talked Dickie into kind of telling Tom that maybe he should stop. Because that's right. The other thing we didn't say is that Dickie invites Tom to be his house guest,
yes,
rather than stay in a hotel. And so Marge seems to be convincing Dickie to uninvite Tom as a house guest, also to uninvite him from the ski trip to Cortina, being planned by a very delicate-faced version of Freddie Miles, who's also English, who they meet in Rome when they're buying the refrigerator. Dickie feels guilty about dismissing Tom, so takes him on kind of a, last tango.
Last date in San Remo.
Last date in San Remo. And it is Dickie's last date. And they take the train. Dickie has doing some shopping for Marge. There's an interesting scene with some acrobats that was in the book, but not in the Minghella movie. And then Dickie and Tom go out on a boat. Dickie on the boat explains to Tom that he thinks he should leave and that he doesn't want him to come to Cortina, and that he feels like maybe he was a little bit dishonest to his father. Dickie is trying to break all this in a gentle way, and at first it seems like maybe Tom's not upset, but then Tom is upset and is being kind of petulant and sarcastic about it. But then sort of finally relents, and kind of simpers and says, no, you're right. I'll leave. And then Dickie turns his back on Tom. Big mistake, to fire up the engine. And Tom thinks about it for about 10 seconds and then picks up the oar and kills Dickie. Then there's this harrowing adventure where, similar to the book, I don't remember the exact order, but essentially Tom ends up in the water with the spinning boat, has to climb back into the boat. The propeller gets dangerously close to his genitals.
Which was not in the book.
It was not in the book, but the feel of that scene is very similar to the book. Tom manages to climb back on. He gets rid of Dickie's body. He brings the boat to an abandoned cove, manages to fill it with rocks and sink it, and then slinks back to the hotel. Then he gets the sense that there might be some heat, that the police might already be investigating. So he gets out of town that night, walking sort of dangerously close to the 2 policemen who are in fact looking for him.
Because the boat renter is talking to them. Yeah.
Right. And he cannot see Tom. He walks behind the boat renter, gets on the train, and has made his escape. Although there is a kind of jump scare with an arm, with a brush on the window that sort of briefly looks like a dead Dickie's arm knocking on, but it's really just somebody cleaning the window, and that's the end of that episode.
That would be great if we took a like sharp turn into the like Pride and Prejudice and zombies land.
Yeah.
You know, it's like oh, they've really taken some license with this adaptation.
Dickie comes back and is stalking Tom as a zombie the entire time.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
And then episode 4 is La Dolce Vita, and we get the beginnings of Tom's assumption of Dickie's identity, and that's pretty much most of the episode. Tom starts selling Dickie's things. He arranges a kind of nefarious deal with Carlo the gangster to sell the boat, which is again not in the book, and begins his ploy of kind of kissing off Marge. And there's a great scene back in Dickie's study where Tom kind of tells Marge, okay, well, Dickie doesn't want to see you anymore. And Marge grills him a little bit, and Tom has some good answers, but then kind of wins the argument by giving Marge the bottle of perfume that Dickie purchased for her, which is sort of enough credibility that Marge leaves hurt, but not entirely suspicious for the moment. I got to say, Dakota Fanning's eyes are the star of that scene. She does a fantastic job of conveying quite a bit while doing very little. It's a very, very good scene. Tom practices Dickie's signature quite a bit, and then begins using that and some other nefarious techniques like passport forgery to cash a big check, 40,000 lire, I believe. And starts his life in Rome. At first, he checks into a very fancy hotel, which he's very excited about, and then learns from the manager, the maitre d', that Marge has called. And so Tom has to check out in a hurry and checks into a much less nice hotel. Eventually writes a letter to Tom's parents and to Marge, speaking up for Tom and saying, I love you and miss you both, and it's Christmas. And there's a lot of very beautiful scenes of Italy on during the Holy Week.
He visits, I think, was it a Caravaggio?
Mm-hmm.
No, or
he's obsessed with Caravaggio.
Yeah, and has a kind of moment with the priest, and I think he ends up in his apartment as Dickie at the end of that at this episode. So he checks out of that hotel and rents this nice apartment, and that's kind of the last plot point. Well, So my first question for you is, what do you think of Johnny Flynn's performance as Dickie Greenleaf?
Both him and Dakota Fanning are odd and believable. I like Johnny Flynn's Dickie. He seems so very credulous to a fault, which I think is kind of what you want out of Dickie. What's interesting about this version of Ripley is that the surroundings are unspeakably beautiful.
Yeah.
And the people are much more normal looking.
Yeah.
And in the Minghella movie, the surroundings are sort of tourist Italy. Like we get kind of the Italy brochure in Anthony Minghella's version. I mean, still Italy, but like it isn't like Italy. like every single shot in this Ripley show looks like a Caravaggio.
There's also, I would say, more time spent on landscape and set relative to actors and acting in this TV show. And part of that's just the mathematics of television. When you have 8 hours, you can have Tom walk up and down the steps 4 times, in nearly real time. Not quite real time, and you can't really do that in a movie, because I think the Minghella movie is also quite beautiful in its landscapes and stuff. And my stepdad had lived on the coast at I want to say Sorvino. It was wherever the there's a naval base, and his father was like the American Navy's liaison officer there for a little bit. And when we watched this movie together a few years ago, and he said this is exactly what it looked like.
Yeah.
You know, like the buses and everything too. But I agree that there's more emphasis on the visuals and the landscape.
Well, the Minghella movie is hot. Like everything is warm. I mean, like it is like midsummer Italy.
Yeah.
And the people, I mean, like every single actor in the Minghella is beautiful. Is beautiful and at the height of their beauty. You know, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Jude Law, Cate Blanchett, Gwyneth Paltrow, Matt Damon. They all look amazing. Yeah. And it's just so warm. Like it's such a relic of the 90s. Like it feels for both of these stories are dark. Like we talked a lot about that when we talked about the book. The feeling of the Minghella movie is a little more optimistic, I think. And this one,
this one, constant sense of foreboding.
Oh yeah, and everybody is rather plain. I mean, Dakota Fanning is the least plain of them, of course.
But I think Johnny Flynn is rather strikingly handsome.
In an odd way, he sort of has like this kind of rumpled skin, and he's not Jude Law. Let's say that.
Right. He's not. Yeah. Well, and maybe more to my point too, and it's interesting to compare it. It's interesting. We're kind of comparing it to two different things.
Yeah.
Because this series, I think, is an attempt to adapt the book more faithfully than the Minghella movie. I love the Minghella movie, but it also it kind of is sort of a riff on source material, but it's its own specific thing. And I think this is a little bit more, and certainly this series has more of the details from the book that Minghella either changed or took out. But the one thing I feel like the Minghella movie does very powerfully for me is I understand why Dickie likes Tom at first and is charmed by him.
Yeah.
And then I understand why that fades. And it fades for a couple different reasons. And in this, I never really understand. By the time we get to episode 3, and you have Johnny Flynn's needing to dismiss Tom, but feeling anxious about it and guilty about it, I think he acts that perfectly.
Yes.
I don't get a sense of why that character likes Tom in the first and second episode. And I don't know if that's Johnny Flynn's fault or the director's fault or the script's fault or a purposeful just maybe there's some narrative purpose for making that sort of obscure. But I found Johnny Flynn's performance to be kind of flat and under-affected for the first two. And then in the third one, suddenly he comes alive to me as a much more interesting character. Yeah. Which is sad because then he's dead. And I'm like, I'm just starting to like Dickie.
Yeah. There's this great moment when they are sitting on the jetty. Dickie kind of kisses off Tom and is like, I've got to find this perfume. Go get yourself a coffee. Go to the beach. I'll meet you at the jetty. Yeah. It's a very dismissive moment. And Tom is sitting on the jetty watching the acrobats.
Yeah.
And Dickie comes up and says, basically they're gay. And Tom in this kind of wonderful moment pushes back and is like, well, what if they are? And you see Dickie kind of be like, you know what? I've spent my whole day looking for perfume. I'm sorry. He apologizes. I'm not going to have this argument. Yeah, he actually is like, I'm sorry about that. Like, hey, you pick what you want to do for the rest of the day. And Tom does, which is killing Dickie. But yeah, he does get a lot more interesting. I think I agree with you. And this was one of my questions from later. So I'm glad we're like just jumping to it now. I also can't locate a reason why Dickie accepts Tom in the first place, except that I think if I were to reach for a reason, Dickie is like a vessel to be filled, and he doesn't have a lot of himself or agency. I mean, he's just a rich kid who's kind of like floundering around Europe, painting badly, and is probably the kind of person who is like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, another American. He said he knew me at Princeton, whatever. And it's the kind of it's his tragic flaw is that he can't see what Marge and his dad eventually can see. That said, I was left wondering in the first 2 episodes, why did they even engage with this guy? Why did Dickie invite him to stay at his house?
So here's another hypothesis, and I wonder if this is the case. I think it's probably done a little bit too subtly. Mm-hmm. In the book and in the Minghella movie, Tom is the closeted gay man. Mm-hmm. I think Tom is also sort of a closeted gay or bi man in this, and that's sort of hinted at. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of moments where Dickie alludes that he knows or thinks Tom is gay, including right before Tom kills him. Mm-hmm. You know, because there's this moment where Dickie says, "It's not just about that, is it?" or something like that. Tom is upset, and Dickie's like, "I think I know why you're really upset." And Tom's like, and Dickie says, "Do you want me to say it?" And Tom says, "No." Yeah. And I think, "Do you want me to say it?" is, "I think you are in love with me or attracted to me. Do you want me to say that out loud?" And Tom says no. I think that's the subtext there. But there are a couple of interesting looks that Dickie gives Tom that, and Marge suspects that Dickie has a crush on Tom as well. And I wonder, and then that we have the acrobats, and I actually have the audio of the acrobats moment pulled. Oh, wow. So can I play that for you?
Please, yeah.
Found it. Look at this. Bravissimo! 10,000 saw at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. What? The daffodils talk. What? Fairies. So what if they are? It's really impressive. I spent half our day looking for the perfume. Sorry about that. You decide what we do with the rest of it. Whatever you want.
Oh, that peal of thunder. Oh,
yeah.
Man, the sound in episode 3, good God.
In all the episodes. The sound design is just incredible, and it's a huge part of the storytelling too. But I don't know. I mean, I to get back to my topic, I feel like one of two things is happening, and one is that there's supposed to be a subtext of an attraction between Dickie and Tom, but maybe played a little bit too subtly. Yeah. Or Johnny Flynn, some combination of Johnny Flynn or Steve Zaillian did not quite envision Dickie, in my mind, quite well enough for the first 2 episodes. Yeah. And he doesn't quite come into focus, I think, into the 3rd episode. Maybe it's a choice, as you're saying, but if it's a choice, it's a weird choice. And I don't think it works well.
And the thing that we're doing right now is both of us are sort of like grasping for a possible interpretation that has not totally come across. And, you know, like whether Dickie is sort of an empty vessel to be filled, or if he is interested, those are gestured at, but not gestured at enough.
I think I agree. Yeah. I think I agree. Because I do think Johnny Flynn is a good actor. Yeah. And when I watched the first episode, you texted me about it, and I was like, and honestly, same thing with Dakota Fanning. I think that her Marge got better too. In the first episode, I don't feel like either of to me, the characters just didn't feel quite fleshed out. And I think I texted you, I was like, Andrew Scott's the only good actor in it, you know, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that's fair, but I think something is going on that gave me that impression in the first couple.
Yeah. The
first one.
It's the first 2 episodes are beautiful, but frustrating because I don't.
Well, a lot of what I like about them is created by the atmosphere.
Yes, exactly.
And not the performances.
Yeah. And I think, you know, so my question for you is about the edits. we lose a big chunk of the book. We lose Tom's meeting with his female friend, whose name I can't remember. Cleo. Love Cleo. We lose that.
The only likable character
and
in the novel.
only character who humanizes Tom.
Yeah.
And we don't get the Friends invasion of the ocean liner. We don't see the ocean liner at all. So what do you make of the edits from the book? Like as you said, we've brought some things back into the book from the book. We get the letter to horrible Aunt Dottie.
She's getting her teeth drilled.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like,
there's just some incredible montage, and I forget the word for it, but like where you're hearing sound of one thing and seeing something not actually related to that. There's a term for that I can't think of offhand. I don't know. I almost wonder if they kind of like the writer's room kind of got the feel for Tom like Ep 3 or Ep 4 because he starts coming into clearer focus, and I think I can't really tell if they want him to be sort of vulnerable and desperate, or if they want him to be kind of a psychopath. And I think Andrew Scott does this thing from time to time where his eyes go dark.
Yeah.
And that's Andrew Scott's like, okay, Tom's going into psychopath mode right now. Like, look out. Like, make sure you know where the ashtray is. You know? Like, make sure you know where the oars are. And I actually don't like that much. It suggests that there's sort of this weird dual nature to him. I don't know. Because the other thing they do is they ramp up his criminal activity.
Yeah.
He in the book, he is doing that kind of like tax fraud stuff, but he never tries to cash the checks.
Yep.
He's too afraid. So it's kind of almost like a hobby. It's like he's sort of in training to be a criminal, and he does have some job. It's just a crappy job, as I recall. And so they kind of make him, less likable.
Yeah,
much
less likable, and less competent too. He tries a bank forgery and doesn't pull it off, and has to kind of beat a hasty retreat before the security guards come for him.
Yeah, and I don't quite know what to make of it. I mean, I think the good version of the less competent Tom is in the first episode where he arrives by train in Italy, can't speak Italian, gets out, is hustled into a taxi cab, probably pays way too much, and is taken to a bench where he passes the night like while revelers are reveling around him. The bus shows up in the morning, he gets on groggy. And actually, you know what? I have this audio pulled too, because then he gets to the post office, and I just want to play. So just for context, I think this is a scene that in the Minghella movie takes about 30 seconds or less. Oh yeah, you'll hear part of that.
Sì, ecco.
I love this postman.
He's wonderful.
Chi è? Prego.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Conosce Richard Greenleaf?
Come?
Dove vivere Richard Greenleaf?
Ah, Riccardo.
Sì, Riccardo.
Certo, su. Su. Momento. Faccio vedere. Prego, vieni. Vieni.
Oh, okay.
Sopra, a piedi, scale, la grande villa, su. Eh?
Okay. Grazie. Mi scusi? Can I leave my bags here?
Le valigie? Poggia pure là.
Oh, grazie.
No, lì no, perché qualcuno potrebbe inciampare. Può inciampare qualcuno. Dall'altra parte.
Okay. Here?
Va bene.
Okay.
It's been a minute and a half. He's still in the post office.
Okay, grazie.
La porta!
La porta. Grazie.
Stairs forever.
Opera? Or church singing?
Yeah.
Church singing. Chorus. Choir.
Bells, seagulls, dogs.
Is the music atmospheric? Is it underscore? Cicadas. Or katydids.
Hello? Oh, per favore, Signor Greenleaf?
Giù,
What?
giù. La spiaggia,
He's at the beach.
la spiaggia. Giù,
Oh, La Spiaggia, beach. Okay. Grazie.
Very staccato edits now.
Yeah. Oh.
And he's in the clothing shop buying the very small bathing wear.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. You know, I want to listen to more of this rather
Yeah.
than watch. I like watching it is beautiful, but like you can really sense like just how important the atmosphere is in this. And it, it's like, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about how like a lot of the actors in this are much more plain than what we see in the Minghella. It's a much smaller movie. It's much less. It's smaller in scope. It's tighter, but at the same time, it's also like you said, there's these huge landscapes. We get big shots of the cliffs and the ocean. Boy, like, and I was thinking about this while I was watching today, that the minor characters are so important. The cleaning ladies and the maitre d's.
And there are a lot of looks.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of silent looks they give, sort of conveying suspicion or something.
Or just watching, but the suspicion is perfectly it's that's Tom's projection.
Right.
Like and it's really well done. With the casting and just the way that these it's I think we've talked about this before, that because I'm going to go back to my obsessions with Chekhov, that the thing that makes Chekhov work is the fact that like everybody has to keep their voice down because like the maid is over there. And so these like very intense conversations, these like very intense personal internal moments are happening in ways where you kind of don't, they can't be big and public. And I think this movie is nailing that. And that 4.5 minutes of sound is just amazing. The different textures, the bugs and the music and the echoing barking of the dogs. It's so Italy.
Yeah, and motor scooters.
Yeah.
And then and also just like the sort of mild indifferent helpfulness of everybody, like su. And then when he realizes Tom doesn't understand, he's like, all right, I'll explain it to you. You're going to, there's some stairs over there. You're going to walk, walk all the way to the big village, and he's gesturing. But, and I think, I think I played that to pair with your last question. And I don't quite know why they made Tom less likable in this one, but I definitely think the New York, I think we're getting if you remember what New York looked like, Tom is always framed in a box of some kind. He's kind of trapped, and then sewage starts coming out of his, shower. And so even though I don't quite know why they're making him a criminal, but I think it's just sort of the dark, they're sort of like he is a creature of, in his mind, this dark, corrupt sort of prison. And Italy is his escape. Yeah. And I think like this scene is him kind of literally sort of washing up on the beach and his escape, and he's helpless. He's sort of reborn in this moment. Like he's helpless like an infant. And I think it does two things. I think one is it explains why Tom is going to do whatever he can to stay in Italy. And, as he starts seeing Dickie's lifestyle and admiring it, why he's going to do whatever he can to get that lifestyle for himself. And also, I think in this moment, it's very hard not to sympathize with Tom.
Well, yeah, because we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. I think maybe the director, Steve Zaillian, is focusing more on these kind of, he started his career as a film editor, and that seems completely unsurprising to me. And maybe that's where he's putting his focus, in this pilot episode and in the second episode. And, maybe he's not the best at directing actors. I don't know, because the performances do get better. And I wonder if it's one of those things where these actors grow into the characters a little bit as they, as the series goes along, and they start kind of, and maybe, when they start seeing early cuts of how Steve Zaillian is taking all these, like, what does Andrew Scott know except for that he had to walk up and down stairs like 17 times, and then the director's like, okay, let's do that one again. You're going to come here and pause, catch your breath, and walk up. All right, go. And Andrew Scott's like, why? I thought I was playing this like psychologically complex character who's going to be having these amazing, like, manipulative conversations, and all I'm doing is walking up steps and putting on a tiny bathing suit, but and maybe
Steve Zaillian's like, yes, but the sound that I'm going to put behind it is amazing.
Which if you're an actor, you can't. How often do actors say, I thought this was going to be a terrible movie until I saw the cut? Yeah. And if you ever watch like a video of somebody filming an iconic scene, you're like, and it's not lit right and the sound is not good, you're like, this is just like watching a bad play. Yeah. And then you see it like well lit and well sound designed and edited, and it's amazing. And so I don't know, maybe that's part of what's going on with that. And I do think the broad answer to your question is Zaillian is focusing more on creating mood. Yeah. And so he doesn't need as many details, but he does deploy some of those details very effectively, like bringing back the Wordsworth quote. Yes. About the dandelions was just masterstroke, and it also shows that he's very, very familiar with the source material, and that he's also willing to make the audience work. Like that, I don't think that scene happens in the Minghella movie. And no, it's like I think he gets off the bus. I think you see him like in his hotel reading a phrase book, and the next scene, the thing you do have is him awkwardly mincing out on the beach in a tiny bathing suit. And remember, Tom, I mean, Matt Damon is pretty handsome and he's in pretty good shape, but they make him extremely pale. And you remember Jude Law. Look at him, Margie. He's so pale. You're so white. Tom. Yeah, he does a great like. Jude Law's Dickie is so good. It's very good. He just nails that like Playboy, that sort of like closed off Playboy very well. But having privileged, completely comfortable with it, dismissive. If he finds something amusing with you, then he becomes your friend for the time being. And then when you become boring to him, he kind of dismisses you, like all of that. And again, I said this earlier, but there's something about the way that Matt Damon plays Ripley, and he's being kind of goofy, and he does an impression of his father, and you can see him sort of friend seducing Dickie.
Yeah.
And that is something that's missing from this, that I miss.
Yeah.
I actually feel like, watching this, I like the story, and then the visuals and the editing, I'm like, well, I'm going to stick around because there's obviously some real talent at work here, and maybe this is going to get better. And what I will say is it did get better.
Yeah.
Like episode 2, it's all right. Episode 3, masterful. I happen to have seen episode 5 too before we decided to do this, but I'll say no more about that.
Got it.
And episode 4 was pretty good as well. I thought episode 3 was the strongest, but I think the conclusion of episode 4 is amazing. And actually, that was my last thing that I have queued, and we have gone for about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So do you have any other questions for me?
I do.
That would be my last thing.
Yeah, so you've sort of gone on record about like that the stuff that you like is about Ripley kind of evading capture. Like that's what that's what you've enjoyed in the Ripley stories, and particularly in the book, in The Talented Mr. Ripley.
I'd say I enjoy it more than you do.
Yeah.
Although in the book I did think it was made too easy for him. But I like that premise. Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing I enjoy about the book and also this is the way in which it is a coming of age story. And the way it is in which somebody kind of assuming the mantle of an identity, even though it's a terrible mantle, there's something about that. But continue. I interrupted your question.
Are you rooting for this Tom?
Oh God. I mean, it's hard to answer that because I know the story.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm rooting for is to be made to want to root for Tom.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for being drawn in. And I will say that in episode 3, you know what? When he's done the murder, which is terrible, and it's pain. I hated watching it. I hated watching that. And then I was kind of rooting for him to get out of the hotel. And again, I'm not proud of that. But there's something about the nature, there's something about the nature of the daring do of that somehow once he's done the terrible thing, that then it becomes this kind of survival story. He's got to sink the boat and clamber up the rocks. And there's something about just like watching his struggle that I did find myself anxious on his behalf.
Yeah.
But what about you?
I'm having trouble rooting for this Tom. He's so dark.
I mean, he's not as likable as Matt Damon's
No, certainly
Tom.
not. And the murder in the Minghella movie is a crime of passion.
Yeah.
And a crime of love. And this is not totally premeditated, but it's all like in the book it's premeditated because there's that section
to do it on
the
the train.
And you kind of see that happening here. This killing is completely in cold blood and portrayed as in cold blood. Dickie even asks him for help a few times. In the Minghella, there's actually more of a fight. There's no fight. He just kills him. And like you're saying, I know that the story is going to continue. So like, it's a kind of hard question to answer totally because like, well, if I'm not rooting for him, I guess I'm just rooting for the series to end at episode 4.
Right.
But I'm not sold. There's not enough to like about this particular Ripley so far. Like he isn't charming in any way that I want this person to get away with it.
Well, here's another articulation of this too, is that I think these books to me are sort of, I treat them as kind of fantasies.
Yeah.
So if I were in real life, if I were to encounter somebody like Tom Ripley, like I would want him to be arrested and prosecuted.
Yes.
And I'd want to stay away. But in sort of Fantasyland, there's some, it's the same thing with like people watching Game of Thrones, and they're like cheering for like, Sansa Stark to take her revenge on Ramsay, who is a terrible person, right? But there is a moment, I don't want to give it away, but she finally takes her revenge on him in a hideous way, and there was a lot of cheers about that. And you're sort of watching that, and you're like, this is actually like really about how people can come to terms with doing horrible violence to other people. And part of what this series is doing to us by making the characters we like suffer and then giving them a chance to take revenge, we're sort of being seduced by the very forces that led them to suffer in the first place. And so I think there's something like that going on. But I think there's some part of me that sees Tom Ripley as a positive metaphor, as a man who decides to take control of his own life and try to outwit the forces of opposition that have mostly kept him in check. And he's a talented guy who's had a bad deal. He's smarter than most of the people around him. And finally, he decides to take action and use that intelligence in order to get the life that he wants. And to do it, he has to do some daring do and has to outwit some people. And there's something I find in a fantasy context and a sort of mythic context admirable that I can relate to about it. But I don't, I think it would be interesting to watch this movie without already, because it's almost more like, it's like when you're watching Hamlet, and you know what's going to happen. So the question is just sort of like,
how does it happen?
How does it happen?
How does this Hamlet happen? Yeah.
How does this Hamlet happen? And I think I agree with you that I don't find this Ripley particularly likable, but there's something about the way the suspense of the suspenseful moments are done, and because he's the protagonist, I find myself anxious on his behalf.
There's a little bit of that like protagonist sleight of hand, where because we're in their shoes, like a little bit of their sympathy, our sympathy sort of is like rubs off on them regardless of how we feel. Like you very rarely don't feel any sympathy for a protagonist because you're mostly in their experience.
Yeah. Did you watch The Shield by any chance?
No, I never did.
I'm trying to remember who played the main character. He's who played Vic in The Shield. He's a pretty well-known actor. He was the same guy who played Michael Chiklis. He's the same guy who played John Belushi. So in that series, I don't want to give too much away, but
I love how you're refraining from spoiling series that are like a decade or more in the past.
I don't see why that matters. There's hundreds of things that are like, I've never read Milton. Don't spoil it for me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't see where it falls in objective time has anything to do with spoiling.
I love the idea of spoiling Paradise Lost. It's in the title.
Well, I know the broad outline, but it's not. I don't subscribe to this idea that's like, oh, you have like 6 weeks to watch something, and after that, everything goes.
You don't think things like sort of like leak into the zeitgeist eventually?
I've never seen Schindler's List, which Zaillian wrote the script for. I mean, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I feel like we all have holes. I've seen more movies, and I remember more movies than most people I know. I've never seen When Harry Met Sally, for example.
I saw Free Willy for the first time this past week.
Never seen it. I do think that Willie escapes in the end.
He does.
And the boy goes.
Yeah, there's that. And holy crap, Michael Madsen is in it.
Oh, really?
It's like a year before we see Michael Madsen cutting off a cop's ear in Reservoir Dogs. And here he is this like very friendly Northwestern dad.
Hey, that's acting for you.
I know.
Well, anyway, so to back up, why The Shield? So I stand by my policy of not spoiling anything.
Excellent.
But slight spoiler. part of the premise is you see one of the protagonists. There's several protagonists in that series, and some episodes are from one character's point of view, some are from others. They're often in conflict with one another. But you see one of the characters do something really, really bad. Mm-hmm. And then there's something like 7 seasons. And during those 7 seasons, the wheels of justice are slowly grinding mm-hmm. to eventually catch him at that thing. But here's the thing. That character becomes a better person during those 7 seasons. Uh-huh. And he's kind of an unlikable character in the first few seasons, but he becomes kinder, he becomes more mature, he becomes like a better parent. And that is a really powerful kind of moral dilemma, mm-hmm. you know, because the show, I mean, it's like a cop drama and whatever, but it does function at this kind of mythic Shakespearean level where, like, you see somebody who is doomed, mm-hmm. and then 7 seasons are about that doom taking its shape. Nice. You know, there's something, or somebody who has committed a sin and is eventually punished. But it takes a very, very long time. And so in that spirit, I want to play my last audio clip. Nice. With Tom Ripley, and it kind of relates to the question that you just asked about Tom. So this is at the end of episode 4. He's finally he's in the midst of kissing off Marge and kind of pretending to break up Marge. He's impersonating Dickie, and as you said, he writes a letter to Dickie's parents. And I would say that one of the motives of this letter is to try to clear Tom Ripley's name. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something about the way it is shot and done that suggests there's another motive too. And so I'm going to play it, and I think what you see him in the church looking at that one of the Caravaggios. I don't think it's where you see the David and Goliath. I think that happens later. You see him in the church looking at something, and then he comes out and he's walking around, and it's dark and it's Christmas time. And then you see him writing the letter, and then in the middle of the letter, I'll tell you after I play it.
Dando a Davide un'espressione compassionevole, forse anche addirittura affettuosa, mentre guarda la testa mozzata di Golia. E ha reso questo legame ancora più forte utilizzando se stesso come modello per entrambi i personaggi. È sempre il viso di Caravaggio, è lui, da giovane e da vecchio. Prego.
Dear Mom and Dad, I'm in Rome looking for an apartment for the winter. As soon as I'm settled, I'll send you the address. I'm sorry to miss another Christmas with you in New York, but I'm trying to work some things through before I come home.
Buon Natale, anche a lei.
I got your letter. I appreciate your concern about Tom, but I have to say you're wrong about him. He's done exactly what you sent him here to do, and has, in fact, helped me. I don't know if you know this, but he's an orphan. And how he speaks about this has reminded me of the importance of family, which I'm ashamed to say I almost lost sight of until he arrived. Somehow, out of all my friends, you picked the right one to send. I love and miss you both. Richard.
There's that thunder peal again.
And then roll credits.
Yeah.
I have an observation, but any thoughts upon hearing that?
I love the conceit of using Johnny Flynn's voice for the letter voiceovers. I think that was a really, really good decision. And I mean, like, Tom is kind of writing the letter to himself, I think. You know, like, I think that's the thing that we're supposed to take here. But he's also, like, missing the point. Like, it's like he's writing the letter It's like a sociopath discovers the concept of family, but yet doesn't feel any of it. And yeah, I do think you're right that this is like, it's another coming of age story. But what's so chilling about this is it's sort of Tom discovering the more levers of manipulation. And it's a pretty haunting moment, I think.
Well, so I have a different interpretation, although you might be right. And for one thing is, I think to be effective at manipulating somebody, you have to be familiar with the emotions that you're manipulating. And so I think the scene with the Caravaggio, where it has David has just killed Goliath and is holding his head, and they have the same face. I think that's supposed to suggest that Tom feels guilty about killing Dickie. Definitely in the book, Tom felt guilty about killing Dickie. But I think the other thing is having the letter paired with Tom giving the money to the homeless person. To me, that association suggests that Tom is doing a couple things here. And one is, yes, he's being manipulative and he's writing this letter disguised as Dickie in order to bolster Tom's reputation, his own reputation with Dickie's parents, because he knows that suspicion might fall on him or something like that. But I also think it's an act of generosity. I think the fact that we see him give the money to the homeless person at the moment that he's telling Dickie's parents in Dickie's voice, I haven't valued family enough. I love you and miss you. I think on some level, Tom knows that that's something that's kind of a gift to Dickie's parents. And that I think what we're seeing with Tom is that when it doesn't cost him anything, and when he has what he needs, he's capable of generosity. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's interesting too because we're inclined to judge Tom, but at the same time, I also wonder if those of us who are generous would be as generous if we were more desperate in our circumstances. Is generosity in some cases a product of privilege?
And what's interesting is like to think about generosity and the means by which somebody comes by the things that you are generous with, and that's what I think is the interesting inversion here is like, yeah, maybe he is being generous, but oh my gosh, the mechanisms by which he has like gained the means to be generous are really bad. And that's interesting. And that's
but more bad than how most wealthy people
right.
have gotten
that's
their
an
wealth
excellent point. Yeah, totally true. And maybe that's what we do. Like in the book, that first chapter is called The Green Cage, and you can't you can't call things green in books and art without like all the attendant illusions that come with it of jealousy and money and things like that, but also growth and verdance and nurturing. And,
Yep.
And I think, you said earlier that like all of the New York shots do a really good job of putting Tom in enclosed spaces. And yeah, that is what this series is doing. And I think in the same way that the Minghella movie is a beautiful product of the 90s, wealth, optimism, color, bigness, the Clintons, that like this Ripley is a real product of our particular moment, claustrophobic, black, white, and gray, but no other color.
Desperate. The walls are closing in.
Yeah. Everything is complicated.
Yeah.
And everything is nuanced. And and it feels apt for our time, but I think that we kind of both agree that it's also like there are moments of it that are a little underrealized.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I also think I've heard from a couple people that said they got kind of bored and gave up watching it. And that the pacing of, some of these scenes is really slow.
I love it.
You know,
I love it. I love that part of it.
Well, I love it too, but I've even had nights. I have to admit, though, there were nights where I'm just like, I'm going to go play my guitar. I don't want to just watch Tom go up and down the steps, or And I think that kind of this is I think the affordance and the cost of television, which is that in a movie theater, it can work really, really well to pace things that way because the audience is effectively captive.
Yeah.
And so you're essentially, it's a dark room with a giant screen and loud sounds. There's nothing else to pay attention to. But the way many of us watch a Netflix series right now, it might be on our laptop or it might be on a screen with like kind of crappy, and there's other things in your room, and you could go pick up a guitar or you could change the channel and watch something else. And I think it's a little bit risky. So I love it too, but I also wonder, if it's well attenuated to today's Netflix. Like I almost feel like the virtues of this Netflix series are maybe slightly wasted on Netflix.
All right, let's go to trivia. Do you want to go or do I want to go?
Do you want to roll a die?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Yeah, I've got a die right here.
I don't have one. Will you roll for me?
I have one right here. If it is, what do you want to do? Do you want me to
even odd? Let's do even odd.
Okay, you are odd.
Yep. Thank you.
It's 11. You're first.
All right. So I gotta call up my thing here. I do have one. I just closed the doc where I wrote it down. Okay. Steve Zaillian talks about seeing a movie as a kid, and that it was the first time he thought about the power of movies. It's a memory that he contains, that he carries to this day. And it's a film that also explores the psychology of murder. Is the formative film that Steve Zaillian saw as a kid A, In Cold Blood, B, Dial M for Murder, C, Les Diaboliques, or D, Murder on the Kazinti Express?
It's a bunch of big cats.
One of them and a big cat corpse.
Yeah, but a big cat corpse. Teeth. Oh, I hadn't thought about the Kazin in a long time. Amazing. Let's see. Les Diaboliques. Dial M for Murder. What was it, A?
In Cold Blood.
In Cold Blood. Was there another movie of In Cold Blood? An older one? I know there was a book. I didn't know they made it into a... Maybe I'm maybe I'm confusing things. As you were saying that, I was like, Rear Window. So I'm going to go with Dial M for Murder.
Another Hitchcock film. It is In Cold Blood, which, you might be thinking of the movie Capote.
That's what I'm thinking of. Was there a movie? There was a movie adaptation of In Cold Blood?
I've never seen it, but I think it came out in like 62 or something like
Amazing.
that. He also talks about being heavily influenced by Sidney Lumet, which I could totally see, because that's another director who uses kind of landscape and atmosphere to convey storytelling as well.
Okay, my question. In episode 3, Dickie is buying perfume while Tom waits outside. The shop is called Non Chiquea Datum, which means A, hidden information, B, not given to everyone, or C, imperfect secrets.
I'm going to go with C.
Good guess. It is not given to everyone.
What's the translation?
Non chiquea datum.
Chiquea. I don't know that verb.
I don't either. It's Latin. I loved that on the inside of the shop, displayed on the wall is simply vanitas. Just sort of like hovering there while Dickie is by. It's just a very nice moment of scene painting and illusion And I thought Not Given to Everyone is like a perfect summation of Tom's plight.
All right, well, what's next are episodes 5 through 8 of Netflix Ripley. Join us in about 2 weeks. Upper Middlebrow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are available to bring your child back from Europe. Music by Ben... No fatalities yet. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. You can learn more about us and find our listener survey at uppermiddlebrow.com. And please, please, please review us in your podcast app so other people can find the show.
And as a reminder, everybody, Jesse and I are both writers and editors, and we would love to help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Watch out for ashtrays.
And busts.